Have you ever wondered what it's really like to live as a woman of faith in today's world? Not the sanitized version you see on social media or the stereotypes portrayed in movies, but the raw, authentic experience of navigating life through the lens of deeply held religious beliefs. Today, we're going beyond surface-level assumptions to explore something extraordinary. We're sitting down with Christian, Jewish, and Muslim women to discover how their faith doesn't just influence what they believe, but fundamentally shapes how they live, love, work, and see the world around them. What you're about to witness isn't your typical interfaith dialogue. This isn't about who's right or wrong, or which religion is superior. This is about understanding the beautiful complexity of how ancient wisdom traditions translate into modern living. We're talking about real women with real challenges, making real decisions guided by convictions that reach back thousands of years. Before we dive deep into these profound conversations, I want to take just a moment to connect with you personally. Where are you watching this from right now? Are you tuning in from North America, somewhere in Europe, perhaps from Asia, Africa, or maybe a corner of the world I haven't even imagined? Drop a comment below and let me know your city or country. There's something incredibly powerful about knowing we're connecting across continents and cultures, united in our curiosity about faith and how it shapes human experience. And listen, if you're finding value in what we're exploring here, I want to personally invite you to subscribe to this channel. This isn't just about growing numbers or hitting algorithm targets. We're building something meaningful here, a community of people who aren't afraid to ask difficult questions, who want to understand different perspectives, and who believe that genuine dialogue can bridge even the widest divides. Your subscription helps us continue creating content that matters, conversations that challenge assumptions and open hearts. What makes today's discussion so compelling is that we're not just talking about theology in abstract terms. We're exploring how faith actually functions in the daily lives of women who take their beliefs seriously. How does a Christian woman's understanding of grace affect the way she handles conflict in her marriage? What does it mean for a Jewish woman to see herself as part of a chosen people? And how does that influence her sense of responsibility in the world? How does a Muslim woman's belief in submission to Allah's will shape her career decisions, her parenting, her dreams? These aren't just philosophical questions. They're deeply practical realities that millions of women navigate every single day. And here's what's fascinating about examining these three Abrahamic faiths side by side. While Christianity, Judaism, and Islam share common roots tracing back to Abraham, the way they've developed over millennia has created distinctly different approaches to living out faith in the modern world. For Christian women, faith often centers around a personal relationship with Jesus Christ. This isn't just about believing certain doctrines or attending church services, though those elements matter. It's about experiencing what Christians call grace, the unmerited favor of God that transforms both heart and behavior. When a Christian woman faces a crisis, she's drawing on a tradition that emphasizes forgiveness, redemption, and the promise that God works all things together for good. This perspective can create a unique form of resilience, a way of viewing suffering and setbacks through the lens of divine purpose. But Christian faith isn't monolithic. The women we'll hear from today represent different expressions of Christianity, each with its own emphasis on how faith should be lived out. Some focus heavily on personal spiritual disciplines like prayer and Bible study, while others emphasize social action and serving the marginalized. Some come from traditions that see women as equal partners in ministry, while others navigate complementarian views that define specific roles for men and women. Jewish women bring an entirely different dimension to our conversation. Judaism isn't just a religion in the way many people think about faith traditions. It's also an ethnicity, a culture, a history of survival against impossible odds. For Jewish women, faith is deeply intertwined with identity, with belonging to a people who have preserved ancient wisdom through millennia of persecution and displacement. The concept of being chosen doesn't mean superiority, as many Jewish women will tell you. Instead, it carries the weight of responsibility, the sense of being called to be a light to the nations, to live in a way that reflects God's character to the world. This creates a unique tension between particularism and universalism, between maintaining distinct Jewish identity and engaging meaningfully with the broader world. Jewish women also navigate a rich tradition of questioning and debate. Unlike faith traditions that might discourage doubt or intellectual wrestling, Judaism has a long history of encouraging rigorous examination of sacred texts and teachings. This creates a dynamic approach to faith where asking difficult questions isn't seen as weakness but as faithfulness. Muslim women enter our conversation carrying their own complex set of experiences and perspectives. Islam, often misunderstood in Western contexts, provides its adherents with what Muslims describe as a complete way of life. For Muslim women, faith isn't compartmentalized into religious activities separate from secular pursuits. Instead, the principle of submission to Allah's will permeates every aspect of existence, from the most mundane daily routines to the most significant life decisions. The concept of submission, often problematic for those outside the faith, takes on different meanings when understood from within. For many Muslim women, surrendering to Allah's will isn't about passivity or oppression, but about finding peace and purpose in aligning their lives with what they believe to be divine guidance. This can create a profound sense of security and direction, even in uncertain circumstances. What's particularly intriguing about examining these three faiths through women's experiences is how gender intersects with religious identity. Each tradition has evolved different understandings of women's roles, capabilities, and spiritual significance. These aren't static concepts frozen in ancient times, but living traditions that continue to develop as women within these communities grapple with modernity, equality, and authentic expression of their faith. Christian women today span the spectrum from those who embrace traditional complementarian roles to those who see no biblical barrier to women in any form of leadership, including pastoral ministry. This diversity reflects ongoing theological discussions within Christianity about how to interpret scriptural teachings about gender in contemporary contexts. Jewish women have seen remarkable changes in recent decades, particularly within non-Orthodox movements where women now serve as rabbis, cantors, and religious leaders in ways that would have been unthinkable just generations ago. Yet even within Orthodox Judaism, women are finding new ways to express their spiritual leadership while remaining within traditional frameworks. Muslim women face perhaps the most complex navigation of all, particularly those living in Western societies where their visible expressions of faith, such as wearing hijab, can make them targets of discrimination while simultaneously serving as powerful statements of identity and conviction. The diversity among Muslim women regarding practices like head covering, career choices, and religious interpretation challenges monolithic stereotypes about Islamic approaches to gender. As we prepare to hear directly from these remarkable women, it's important to remember that we're not seeking to determine which faith tradition is correct or superior. Instead, we're exploring how sincere faith, regardless of its particular expression, shapes human experience in profound and meaningful ways. We're investigating how ancient wisdom traditions continue to provide guidance, comfort, and purpose in our rapidly changing world. The conversations you're about to witness reveal both the distinctiveness of each faith tradition and the surprising commonalities that emerge when people of deep conviction discuss what matters most to them. You'll hear about struggles with doubt, the challenge of living countercultural lives, the joy of finding meaning and purpose, and the complex ways that faith intersects with every aspect of human existence. These women aren't spokespersons for their entire traditions. They're individuals sharing their personal experiences of what it means to live as women of faith in the 21st century. Their perspectives may challenge your assumptions, inspire your curiosity, or deepen your understanding of how religious conviction translates into daily living. What emerges from these conversations is a picture of faith that's far more nuanced, thoughtful, and personally meaningful than many secular observers might expect. These aren't women who've checked their intellects at the door or blindly accepted everything they've been taught. They're thinking, questioning, growing individuals who found in their respective traditions not limitations but liberation, not answers to every question but frameworks for living meaningful lives. The depth of these conversations will surprise you. We're talking about everything from how faith influences parenting decisions to career choices, from approaches to suffering and loss to perspectives on social justice and community responsibility. We're exploring how women balance personal autonomy with religious authority, how they navigate conflicts between cultural expectations and religious teachings, and how they find authentic expression of their faith in contexts that may not always understand or welcome their convictions. What strikes me most profoundly about these women is their courage. Not the kind of courage that makes headlines or wins awards, but the quiet, daily courage required to live according to deeply held convictions in a world that often misunderstands or dismisses their choices. It's the courage to wear hijab knowing you might face stares or discrimination. It's the courage to keep kosher in a society built around convenience. It's the courage to forgive when everything inside you screams for revenge, simply because your faith teaches that grace is more powerful than justice. These conversations reveal something that often gets lost in academic discussions about religion. Faith isn't just about believing certain propositions or following specific rules. For these women, faith is a lens through which they interpret every experience, a compass that guides every decision, a source of strength that sustains them through life's inevitable challenges. It's deeply personal yet profoundly communal, ancient yet startlingly relevant to contemporary concerns. When Christian women speak about their relationship with Jesus Christ, they're describing something that goes far beyond weekly church attendance or saying prayers before meals. They're talking about a living relationship that influences how they handle workplace conflicts, how they respond to their children's struggles, how they process grief and loss. The concept of grace, so central to Christian faith, isn't just theological doctrine for them. It's a practical reality that shapes how they extend forgiveness to others and receive forgiveness for themselves. But even among Christian women, you'll discover fascinating diversity in how faith is lived out. Some come from traditions that emphasize personal devotion and individual spiritual growth, spending hours in prayer and Bible study, seeking to align their hearts more closely with what they believe to be God's will. Others express their faith primarily through service to others, seeing acts of compassion and justice as the truest expressions of Christian love. The differences become even more pronounced when you consider how various Christian traditions approach women's roles within the church and family. Some of these women come from backgrounds where they've been taught that biblical submission means accepting male headship in marriage and church leadership. Others have been raised to believe that gender equality is not only compatible with Christianity, but demanded by it. Watching them navigate these different interpretations while maintaining authentic faith is genuinely remarkable. What emerges clearly from every conversation is that these aren't women who've simply inherited their parents' beliefs without question. They've wrestled with doubt, examined alternatives, and chosen to embrace their faith as thinking adults. Their testimonies carry weight precisely because they've counted the cost and decided their convictions are worth the sacrifices they require. Jewish women bring an entirely different dynamic to our exploration of faith and daily life. For them, being Jewish isn't something they do on certain days or in specific places. It's who they are, woven into their identity in ways that affect everything from career choices to food preferences to how they understand their place in history. The weight of carrying forward a tradition that stretches back thousands of years, that survived slavery in Egypt, exile in Babylon, persecution throughout Europe, and the Holocaust, creates a unique sense of responsibility and purpose. The concept of being chosen, so central to Jewish identity, gets expressed in fascinating ways through these women's lives. Rather than creating arrogance or superiority, it seems to generate a profound sense of obligation to live worthy of that calling. They speak about being called to be a light to the nations, to demonstrate through their lives what it means to live in covenant with God. This creates a beautiful tension between maintaining their distinct identity as Jews while engaging meaningfully with the broader world around them. What's particularly striking about Jewish women's approach to faith is the intellectual rigor they bring to religious questions. Judaism has a long tradition of debate, questioning, and wrestling with difficult texts and concepts. These women don't see doubt as the enemy of faith, but as an essential component of genuine belief. They've been taught to ask hard questions, to examine their traditions critically, and to find their own authentic relationship with Jewish teaching and practice. This intellectual approach extends to how they navigate modern challenges that ancient texts didn't explicitly address. Whether it's questions about technology use on the Sabbath, career decisions, or bioethical dilemmas, Jewish women draw on centuries of rabbinical wisdom while applying their own reasoning and moral intuition. The result is a faith that feels both ancient and contemporary, rooted in tradition, yet responsive to current realities. The diversity within Judaism itself adds another layer of complexity to these conversations. Orthodox women navigate very different expectations and opportunities than their conservative or Reform sisters. Yet across these denominational lines, you'll hear common themes about the centrality of family, the importance of education, the obligation to pursue justice, and the deep satisfaction that comes from participating in rituals and practices that connect them to generations of Jewish women who came before. Muslim women perhaps face the most complex challenges in expressing their faith authentically in Western societies. Islam provides what Muslims describe as a complete way of life, offering guidance not just for worship, but for every aspect of human existence. For these women, faith isn't compartmentalized into religious activities separate from secular pursuits. Instead, their submission to Allah's will permeates everything from business decisions to parenting approaches to personal relationships. The concept of submission, often misunderstood by those outside Islam, reveals itself through these conversations to be far more nuanced and empowering than many stereotypes suggest. For many Muslim women, surrendering to Allah's will isn't about passivity or oppression. Instead, it represents a conscious choice to align their lives with what they believe to be divine wisdom, finding in that alignment a source of peace, purpose, and strength that sustains them through both ordinary days and extraordinary challenges. The visible nature of some Islamic practices, particularly wearing hijab, creates unique dynamics for Muslim women in non-Muslim societies. These women describe the complex calculations involved in choosing how to express their faith publicly. Some see head covering as a non-negotiable religious obligation that they'll maintain regardless of social consequences. Others view it as a personal choice that can be adapted to circumstances. Still others have decided that modesty can be expressed in ways that don't require head covering. What emerges from their testimonies is a picture of women who've thought deeply about these choices rather than simply following family or cultural expectations. They've considered the theological arguments, weighed the practical implications, and made decisions they can defend both to their religious communities and to the broader society in which they live. The 5 daily prayers that structure Muslim religious life create a rhythm that shapes how these women organize their entire existence. Rather than seeing prayer as an interruption to their real lives, they describe it as an anchor that keeps them centered on what matters most. Whether they're students, professionals, mothers, or community leaders, they've found ways to integrate regular prayer into their schedules, often describing it as a source of peace and clarity in busy, demanding lives. Perhaps most powerfully, these Muslim women speak about finding empowerment through their faith rather than limitation. They describe how Islamic teachings about women's education, property rights, and spiritual equality have shaped their ambitions and self-understanding. Many come from families where their mothers and grandmothers were encouraged to pursue education and careers, seeing professional success as compatible with, even mandated by, their religious obligations. The intersection of faith and femininity creates fascinating conversations across all 3 traditions. Each religion has evolved different understandings of women's roles, capabilities, and spiritual significance. These aren't static concepts frozen in ancient times, but living traditions that continue to develop as women within these communities grapple with questions of equality, opportunity, and authentic expression of their beliefs. What you'll discover through these intimate conversations is that women of faith aren't the passive, unthinking followers that secular stereotypes often suggest. They're dynamic, intelligent, questioning individuals who found in their respective traditions not limitations but liberation, not easy answers but frameworks for living meaningful, purposeful lives. Their stories challenge assumptions, inspire curiosity, and reveal the profound ways that sincere religious conviction continues to shape human experience in our rapidly changing world. Their commitment to living out their beliefs authentically becomes even more remarkable when you consider the cultural pressures they face. These women exist at the intersection of ancient wisdom and modern expectations, navigating worlds that often seem fundamentally at odds with each other. The secular culture surrounding them frequently views their religious commitments as outdated, restrictive, or even oppressive. Yet through their own testimonies, you'll hear a completely different narrative emerge. Take the question of women's roles within religious communities. This isn't just an abstract theological debate for these women. It's a lived reality that affects everything from their career aspirations to their family structures to their sense of personal identity. The Christian women you'll meet come from traditions spanning the spectrum from highly complementarian to fully egalitarian. Yet each has found ways to express her gifts and calling within her particular theological framework. Some describe wrestling with biblical interpretations that seem to limit women's leadership roles, ultimately finding peace in understanding these passages within their historical context while discovering new avenues for influence and service. Others speak about growing up in traditions where women's equality in ministry was assumed, describing how this foundation shaped their confidence and ambitions from an early age. The Jewish women bring their own unique perspective to questions of gender and religious authority. Orthodox Judaism maintains traditional distinctions between men's and women's religious obligations and opportunities. Yet the women from these communities describe finding profound meaning and spiritual fulfillment within these frameworks. They speak about the special sanctity attributed to women's roles in maintaining Jewish homes and raising Jewish children, viewing these responsibilities not as limitations, but as sacred callings. Meanwhile, women from more liberal Jewish movements describe the revolutionary changes they've witnessed within their lifetimes. The ordination of women as rabbis, once unthinkable, has become routine in Reform and conservative Judaism. These women speak about standing on the shoulders of pioneers who fought for these opportunities, while also grappling with the ongoing challenges of balancing career and family in demanding religious leadership roles. The Muslim women offer perhaps the most complex perspectives on gender and faith. They describe navigating societies that often view Islam as inherently oppressive to women, while simultaneously dealing with some Muslim communities that may indeed place unnecessary restrictions on women's participation in religious and public life. Their testimonies reveal women who've studied Islamic texts carefully, distinguishing between divine commandments and cultural traditions, between authentic religious requirements and patriarchal interpretations. Many describe finding in the Quran and Islamic tradition powerful affirmations of women's spiritual equality and intellectual capability. They point to examples from early Islamic history of women who were scholars, business leaders, and even warriors. For them, wearing hijab or choosing more conservative dress isn't about submission to male authority, but about expressing their identity as Muslim women and focusing attention on their character and capabilities rather than their physical appearance. The challenge of raising children while maintaining authentic faith creates another fascinating dimension to these conversations. These women aren't just trying to pass on religious beliefs to the next generation. They're attempting to transmit entire worldviews, ways of understanding reality that differ significantly from the dominant culture their children encounter daily. Christian mothers describe the delicate balance of teaching their children about grace and forgiveness while also helping them develop strong moral boundaries. They want their children to understand that faith isn't about following rules to earn God's love, but about responding to God's love through obedient living. This requires helping young people navigate questions about suffering, injustice, and doubt, while maintaining trust in God's goodness and sovereignty. Jewish mothers face the additional complexity of transmitting both religious and cultural identity. They're not just teaching their children what to believe, but who they are as part of the Jewish people. This includes difficult conversations about Jewish history, including persecution and survival, while fostering pride in Jewish contributions to civilization and commitment to Jewish continuity. The responsibility feels particularly weighty, given the challenges facing Jewish communities in many parts of the world. These mothers describe working to instill in their children both rootedness in Jewish tradition and the skills necessary to engage successfully with the broader world. They want their children to be proudly Jewish while also being confident global citizens. Muslim mothers navigate perhaps the most complex terrain of all. They're raising children who may face discrimination or misunderstanding because of their religious identity, while also wanting to instill in them confidence in their faith and heritage. Many describe careful conversations about how to respond to ignorance or prejudice, teaching their children to be both proud ambassadors for Islam and wise navigators of potentially hostile environments. The question of how much accommodation to make to surrounding culture creates ongoing challenges. These mothers want their children to maintain Islamic values and practices, while also succeeding in educational and professional environments that may not understand or accommodate their religious needs. This requires developing sophisticated strategies for maintaining religious identity while building bridges with people from different backgrounds. Education emerges as a central theme across all three traditions, though each approaches it somewhat differently. Christian women often describe education as a tool for understanding God's creation more fully and serving others more effectively. Many come from traditions that highly value intellectual development, seeing learning as a form of worship and a means of becoming more effective in whatever calling God has given them. The integration of faith and learning creates fascinating dynamics in their educational choices. Some choose explicitly Christian educational environments where their beliefs will be reinforced and developed. Others deliberately engage with secular institutions, viewing them as mission fields, where they can demonstrate the relevance of Christian faith to academic and professional pursuits. Jewish women bring their tradition's legendary emphasis on education and scholarship to these conversations. Learning isn't just valued instrumentally in Jewish culture. It's considered a religious obligation and a form of worship. These women describe growing up in families where academic achievement was expected and celebrated, where questioning and debate were encouraged rather than discouraged. This educational emphasis extends beyond secular subjects to include intensive study of Jewish texts and traditions. Many describe spending years studying Hebrew, Jewish law, and Jewish history, developing sophisticated understanding of their religious heritage that enables them to engage thoughtfully with both traditional sources and contemporary challenges. Muslim women speak about education with particular passion, often referencing the Islamic teaching that seeking knowledge is obligatory for all believers, male and female. Many come from families where education was seen as essential for effective service to Allah and the Muslim community. They describe parents who sacrificed significantly to ensure their daughters received excellent educations, viewing this investment as both practical necessity and religious obligation. The emphasis on education creates interesting dynamics when these women choose their own career paths. Rather than viewing professional success as potentially conflicting with religious commitment, many describe their careers as expressions of their faith. They see their work as opportunities to serve others, to demonstrate the positive values their religions teach, and to support their families and communities. The workplace becomes another arena where faith and modern life intersect in complex ways. These women describe navigating professional environments where their religious commitments may be misunderstood or accommodated grudgingly. They've developed strategies for maintaining their religious practices while building successful careers, often becoming advocates for greater religious accommodation in their workplaces. Christian women describe the challenge of living out their faith authentically in competitive, often cutthroat professional environments. They speak about finding ways to demonstrate Christian values like integrity, compassion, and servant leadership while still achieving professional success. Some describe having to make difficult decisions about positions or opportunities that would require compromising their religious convictions. The question of work-life balance takes on additional complexity when viewed through the lens of religious commitment. These women aren't just trying to balance career and family. They're trying to integrate their professional lives with their understanding of divine calling and religious obligation. Jewish women in professional settings often describe the challenge of observing Sabbath and Jewish holidays while maintaining career momentum. This requires careful planning, clear communication with colleagues and supervisors, and sometimes difficult choices about opportunities that conflict with religious obligations. Many describe finding ways to turn these challenges into opportunities for education and bridge building with non-Jewish colleagues. The visibility of Jewish identity in professional settings varies considerably depending on individual choices and workplace cultures. Some Jewish women describe being very open about their religious identity, using it as a bridge for building relationships and educating others about Jewish traditions. Others prefer to maintain lower profiles, especially in environments where they're concerned about potential discrimination or uncomfortable attention. Muslim women face unique challenges in professional environments, particularly those who choose to wear hijab or observe other visible Islamic practices. They describe the complex calculations involved in deciding how to present themselves professionally, balancing authentic expression of their faith with practical considerations about career advancement and workplace acceptance. Many describe having to work twice as hard to prove their competence and commitment, knowing that they're often representing not just themselves, but Islam more broadly in the minds of their colleagues. This creates additional pressure, but also opportunities for positive representation and education about Islamic values and practices. The 5 daily prayers required in Islam create particular logistical challenges in many workplaces. These women describe developing creative solutions for maintaining their prayer obligations while fulfilling professional responsibilities. Some speak about educating supervisors and colleagues about their religious needs, often finding greater accommodation than they initially expected. Financial decisions become another area where faith intersects with practical life in interesting ways. Each of these traditions offers guidance about money, work, and economic justice, though their specific teachings differ significantly. The women you'll meet describe how their religious convictions influence everything from career choices to spending habits to charitable giving. Christian women often speak about the concept of stewardship, viewing their financial resources as gifts from God to be managed responsibly for His glory and the benefit of others. This perspective influences both their earning and spending decisions, leading many to choose careers based on calling rather than just compensation, and to practice generous giving even when their own resources are limited. The prosperity gospel, popular in some Christian circles, creates tension for women who've been taught that faithful Christians should expect material blessing, while also observing that many faithful people struggle financially. These conversations reveal sophisticated theological thinking about the relationship between faith and financial success. Jewish women describe approaches to money and work influenced by Jewish teachings about justice, charity, and community responsibility. The concept of tzedakah, often translated as charity but literally meaning justice, creates obligations that go beyond voluntary giving to include systematic support for those in need. Many describe growing up in families where financial success was viewed positively, but always within the context of broader community obligations. The expectation wasn't just to accumulate wealth, but to use it responsibly for family, community, and broader social good. Islamic teachings about money and finance create particularly interesting dynamics for Muslim women in modern economies. Prohibitions against charging or paying interest require creative approaches to major financial decisions like home purchases or business investments. Many describe learning about Islamic banking and finance, finding ways to participate in modern economic life while adhering to religious principles. The Islamic emphasis on charitable giving, including the obligatory annual zakat payment, influences how these women think about budgeting and financial planning. Rather than viewing charitable giving as optional, they incorporate it as a necessary component of financial health, often describing how this obligation helps them maintain proper perspective on material possessions. Community involvement emerges as another crucial area where faith shapes daily life for these women. None of them view their religious commitment as purely private or individual. Instead, they describe faith as inherently communal, requiring active participation in religious communities and broader social engagement. Christian women describe their churches not just as places they attend for weekly worship, but as communities that shape their social lives, provide support during difficult times, and offer opportunities for service and leadership. Many speak about the challenge of finding churches that align with both their theological convictions and their sense of calling as women. The diversity within Christianity creates interesting dynamics as these women describe navigating different church cultures and expectations. Some come from traditions where women's leadership is celebrated and encouraged, while others have had to work within more restrictive frameworks to find meaningful ways to contribute their gifts and talents. The question of denominational loyalty versus personal conviction creates ongoing tension for some. They describe times when they've had to choose between staying in familiar religious communities that may not fully support their sense of calling, or seeking new communities that better align with their understanding of how faith should be lived out. Jewish women describe synagogue involvement that goes far beyond weekly services to include extensive volunteer work, fundraising for Israel and other Jewish causes, and participating in life cycle events throughout their communities. The expectation of active community involvement seems to be particularly strong in Jewish culture, creating both opportunities and obligations that shape these women's social lives and time commitments. The various movements within Judaism create different expectations and opportunities for women's involvement. Those from Orthodox communities describe finding meaningful roles within traditional frameworks, while women from more liberal movements often hold formal leadership positions that would have been unthinkable in previous generations. The global nature of Jewish community creates additional dimensions to their involvement. Many describe feeling responsibility not just for their local Jewish communities but for Jewish welfare worldwide, particularly regarding Israel and Jews facing persecution or discrimination in other parts of the world. Muslim women describe mosque involvement that varies significantly depending on their particular communities and local cultures. Some come from mosques where women's participation is encouraged and facilitated, with separate prayer spaces, women's programs, and opportunities for female religious education and leadership. Others describe having to advocate for greater inclusion of women in mosque activities and decision-making processes. These conversations reveal women who are working to reform and improve their religious communities while maintaining respect for religious authorities and traditional practices. The diversity within Muslim communities creates complex dynamics as these women navigate different interpretations of Islamic teachings about women's roles and participation. Some come from more conservative backgrounds where women's public religious involvement is limited, while others have grown up in communities where women's active participation is expected and celebrated. These community involvements aren't just social activities for these women. They represent expressions of their faith commitments and opportunities to live out their religious values in practical ways. Whether they're teaching Sunday school, organizing charity drives, or advocating for social justice causes, they view their community engagement as integral to their spiritual lives, rather than separate from them. The conversations reveal women who found in their respective faith traditions not narrow restrictions, but broad frameworks for meaningful, purposeful living. They describe religious commitments that challenge them intellectually, engage them emotionally, and provide practical guidance for navigating the complexities of modern life. What emerges most powerfully from these intimate discussions is a picture of faith that's far more sophisticated, nuanced, and personally meaningful than many secular observers might expect. These aren't women who've checked their intellects at the door or blindly accepted everything they've been taught. They're thinking, questioning, growing individuals who found in their respective traditions not easy answers to every question but reliable compasses for navigating life's challenges and opportunities. Their stories challenge stereotypes, inspire curiosity, and reveal the profound ways that sincere religious conviction continues to shape human experience in our rapidly changing world. As you listen to their words, you'll discover that faith isn't just about what people believe, but about how those beliefs translate into the countless decisions, relationships, and commitments that make up a human life. These women represent millions of others around the world who are quietly, courageously living out their convictions in ways that make their communities stronger, their families more loving, and their own lives more meaningful. Their testimonies offer glimpses into what it means to find purpose, peace, and power in surrendering to something greater than yourself, while still maintaining agency, intelligence, and authentic personal expression. The conversations you're about to witness will challenge you to think more deeply about the role of faith in human life, regardless of your own religious background or convictions. They reveal the beautiful complexity of how ancient wisdom traditions continue to provide guidance, hope, and meaning in our contemporary world, mediated through the experiences of remarkable women who've chosen to let their beliefs shape not just their Sundays or Sabbaths, but every moment of their existence. These conversations become even more powerful when you witness how these women handle disagreement and theological differences. What struck me most during their discussions was not their uniformity of belief, but their ability to engage respectfully with perspectives that fundamentally challenge their own worldviews. This isn't the superficial tolerance we often see in public discourse, where people avoid real engagement to maintain politeness. This is something deeper, a willingness to listen genuinely while holding firmly to their own convictions. When the Christian women spoke about salvation through Jesus Christ alone, they weren't making casual statements about religious preference. They were articulating what they believed to be the most important truth in the universe, the difference between eternal life and eternal death. Yet when the Jewish and Muslim women challenged this exclusivity, the Christians engaged thoughtfully rather than defensively, explaining their beliefs while genuinely listening to alternative perspectives. The Jewish women brought their tradition's emphasis on ethical living and communal responsibility into sharp focus when discussing salvation and divine judgment. Their perspective that good actions matter more than correct beliefs created fascinating tension with Christian emphasis on grace through faith. Yet rather than talking past each other, these women found ways to explore the deeper questions about human nature, divine justice, and what it means to live worthy of our calling. When discussions turned to the nature of God Himself, the theological differences became even more pronounced. The Christian women spoke about the Trinity not as an abstract doctrine, but as a lived reality that shapes how they understand God's love and accessibility. For them, Jesus isn't just a great teacher or prophet, but God Himself taking on human flesh to bridge the gap between divine holiness and human sinfulness. The Jewish and Muslim women challenged this understanding directly, pointing to scriptural passages that emphasize God's absolute oneness and transcendence. Their conviction that God cannot be human, that divine unity admits no partners or divisions, represents thousands of years of monotheistic tradition. Yet even in these fundamental disagreements, the conversation remained respectful and genuinely curious about understanding different perspectives. What emerged from these theological discussions was something remarkable. These women demonstrated that it's possible to hold strong convictions while still engaging meaningfully with those who disagree. They showed that genuine faith doesn't require intellectual isolation or defensive hostility toward alternative viewpoints. Instead, their confidence in their own beliefs seemed to free them to listen carefully and respond thoughtfully to challenges. The conversation about religious authority revealed additional layers of complexity in how these women navigate their faith traditions. Each religion has developed different approaches to determining religious truth and interpreting sacred texts. The women you'll meet aren't just passive recipients of religious teaching, but active participants in understanding and applying their traditions to contemporary situations. Christian women describe their relationship with biblical authority in nuanced ways that go beyond simple literalism or liberal dismissal. Many spoke about wrestling with difficult passages while maintaining confidence in Scripture's overall trustworthiness and relevance. They described processes of studying original languages, historical contexts, and theological frameworks to understand how ancient texts apply to modern situations. The role of church leadership and denominational teaching creates additional dynamics for Christian women. Some come from traditions where pastoral authority is highly respected, but not considered infallible, while others navigate more hierarchical structures where religious authorities carry greater weight in determining correct interpretation and practice. Jewish women brought their tradition's emphasis on rabbinical interpretation and ongoing discussion to bear on questions of religious authority. They described growing up with the understanding that studying and questioning are essential components of faithful Jewish living. The concept of multiple valid interpretations within certain bounds creates space for individual understanding while maintaining communal standards. The role of Jewish law and its contemporary application creates fascinating dynamics. as these women described navigating modern situations that ancient texts didn't explicitly address. They spoke about consulting rabbinical authorities while also developing their own understanding of how Jewish principles apply to contemporary, ethical, and practical questions. Muslim women described their relationship with Islamic religious authority in ways that revealed both deep respect for scholarly tradition and personal responsibility for understanding their faith. Many spoke about studying Arabic to better understand the Quran directly, rather than relying solely on translations or interpretations provided by others. The concept of scholarly consensus and individual interpretation creates interesting tensions for Muslim women navigating contemporary challenges. They described seeking guidance from knowledgeable religious authorities, while also recognizing their personal responsibility to understand and apply Islamic teachings to their specific circumstances. These discussions about religious authority led naturally into conversations about how these women handled doubt and spiritual struggles. Rather than presenting faith as constant certainty or emotional high, they described authentic spiritual journeys that include questions, disappointments, and periods of wrestling with difficult aspects of their beliefs. Christian women spoke openly about times when God seemed distant or when prayers appeared to go unanswered. They described working through intellectual questions about suffering, evil, and biblical interpretation while maintaining their fundamental trust in God's goodness and sovereignty. Many emphasized that doubt isn't the opposite of faith, but can be a component of mature belief. The Christian understanding of grace provides a unique framework for handling spiritual failure and struggle. These women described finding comfort in the belief that their relationship with God isn't dependent on their perfect performance or constant spiritual success, but on God's unchanging love and acceptance through Christ. Jewish women brought their tradition's acceptance of questioning and struggle into their descriptions of spiritual growth. Many spoke about the Jewish concept of wrestling with God, drawing on Jacob's example of literally wrestling with a divine being and receiving a blessing through that struggle. The emphasis on community support during times of doubt and difficulty created interesting dynamics as Jewish women described navigating spiritual challenges. Rather than viewing doubt as primarily individual problems to be solved privately, they spoke about communal resources and support systems that help individuals work through difficulties while maintaining connection to their religious community. Muslim women described their approaches to spiritual struggle through the lens of their understanding of divine wisdom and human limitation. Many spoke about finding peace in the concept of submission to Allah's will, even when they don't understand particular circumstances or experiences. The Islamic emphasis on regular prayer and remembrance of God provides practical tools for maintaining spiritual connection during difficult times. These women described how the rhythm of daily prayers helps them process challenges and maintain perspective on what matters most, even when life becomes overwhelming or confusing. The question of how faith influences romantic relationships and marriage created some of the most personal and revealing conversations. These women don't just bring their religious beliefs into their marriages as additional components alongside other shared interests. Their faith fundamentally shapes how they understand love, commitment, conflict resolution, and the purpose of marriage itself. Christian women described marriage as more than just a personal relationship between two people who care about each other. For them, marriage represents a covenant relationship that reflects God's love for His people. This understanding influences everything from how they choose partners to how they handle marital conflict, to how they understand their roles as wives and mothers. The Christian emphasis on forgiveness and grace creates unique dynamics in how these women approach marital difficulties. Rather than viewing marriage as a contract that can be dissolved when conditions aren't met, many described it as a covenant commitment that requires working through problems with divine help and wisdom. The question of gender roles within marriage revealed significant diversity among Christian women. Some come from traditions that emphasize complementarian marriage relationships, where husbands and wives have different but equally valuable roles, while others embrace fully egalitarian approaches where gender doesn't determine function or authority within the marriage. Jewish women brought their understanding of marriage as both personal relationship and communal responsibility into these discussions. Many spoke about the Jewish emphasis on marriage as essential for human flourishing and community continuity, creating expectations and support systems that differ significantly from broader secular culture. The concept of Jewish matchmaking and community involvement in relationship formation created interesting dynamics as these women described how they met their spouses and made decisions about marriage. Some described more traditional approaches where families and communities played significant roles in introduction and courtship, while others navigated more modern dating approaches while maintaining Jewish values and priorities. The question of interfaith marriage creates particular challenges for Jewish women, given concerns about religious and cultural continuity. Many describe the complex emotions and practical considerations involved in these decisions, balancing personal happiness with communal expectations and religious obligations. Muslim women described marriage through the lens of Islamic teachings about mutual respect, shared responsibility, and spiritual partnership. Many emphasized that Islamic marriage isn't just about personal fulfillment, but about creating families and communities that reflect Islamic values and support spiritual growth. The Islamic approach to courtship and marriage involves particular guidelines about interaction between unmarried men and women, creating different dynamics than those common in secular Western culture. These women described navigating these guidelines while still developing meaningful relationships and making informed decisions about marriage partners. The question of marriage contracts and women's rights within Islamic marriage revealed sophisticated understanding of religious law and contemporary application. Many spoke about ensuring that their marriage agreements protected their interests and reflected their understanding of Islamic teaching about women's rights and responsibilities within marriage. As these conversations deepened, what became most apparent was how thoroughly these women's faith commitments shape not just their major life decisions, but their daily rhythms, their responses to ordinary challenges, and their understanding of what makes life meaningful and worthwhile. Their religious beliefs aren't add-ons to otherwise secular lives, but foundational frameworks that influence everything from morning routines to career decisions to parenting approaches. The authenticity of their testimonies comes through in their willingness to acknowledge the costs and challenges of living according to religious conviction in secular societies. They don't present faith as an easy solution to life's problems, but as a demanding commitment that requires constant choice and ongoing growth. Yet despite the challenges they describe, these women speak about their faith with joy and gratitude rather than burden or resentment. They've found in their respective traditions not limitation but liberation, not narrow restriction but broad frameworks for meaningful living. Their stories challenge secular assumptions about religious commitment, while revealing the continued relevance of ancient wisdom for contemporary life. As we continue to explore these remarkable conversations, you'll discover how faith shapes not just personal decisions, but approaches to social justice, community engagement, and global citizenship. These women aren't retreating from the world into religious enclaves, but engaging actively with contemporary challenges while drawing on their religious traditions for wisdom, motivation, and hope. Their testimonies offer glimpses into what it means to live with purpose and conviction in an uncertain world, to find strength in surrender to something greater than yourself, and to discover that the ancient paths can still provide reliable guidance for navigating the complexities of modern existence. The conversations ahead will challenge your assumptions, expand your understanding, and reveal the beautiful diversity of human experience when lived through the lens of sincere religious faith. What becomes increasingly clear as these conversations unfold is how these women's faith commitments extend far beyond personal spirituality into their understanding of social responsibility and justice. Each tradition offers distinct perspectives on how believers should engage with societal problems, respond to injustice, and work toward positive change in their communities and the broader world. Christian women spoke passionately about their understanding of the gospel as both personal transformation and social mandate. They described how their belief in God's love for all people compels them to work against racism, poverty, and oppression. Many referenced Jesus' teachings about caring for the least fortunate as central to authentic Christian living, not optional add-ons for particularly motivated believers. The diversity within Christian approaches to social justice created fascinating discussions about how faith translates into political and social action. Some emphasized individual acts of compassion and charity as primary expressions of Christian love, while others argued for systematic approaches to addressing injustice through policy change and institutional reform. The question of how to balance evangelism with social action revealed different theological emphases among Christian women. Some describe these as inseparable aspects of gospel witness, arguing that caring for physical needs and sharing spiritual truth go hand in hand. Others expressed concern about social action becoming a substitute for proclaiming salvation through Christ, emphasizing the eternal significance of spiritual transformation over temporary material improvement. Jewish women brought their tradition's powerful emphasis on tikkun olam, repairing the world, into discussions about social responsibility. They described growing up with the understanding that working for justice isn't optional for observant Jews, but represents a fundamental obligation flowing from their covenant relationship with God. The historical Jewish experience of persecution and marginalization created unique perspectives on fighting injustice and protecting vulnerable populations. Many spoke about feeling particular responsibility to speak out against discrimination and oppression, drawing on their own community's history of suffering while recognizing their current privileges and opportunities. The tension between particular concern for Jewish welfare and universal humanitarian obligations created complex dynamics as these women described their priorities and commitments. They spoke about supporting Israel and advocating for Jewish communities worldwide, while also engaging with broader social justice causes affecting all people. Muslim women described their social engagement through the lens of Islamic teachings about human dignity, social responsibility, and divine accountability. Many emphasize that caring for the poor and working against injustice aren't just good deeds in Islam, but religious obligations that affect one's standing before Allah. These remarkable women have shown us that faith isn't a relic of the past, but a living force that shapes every aspect of modern life. Their courage to live authentically according to their deepest convictions, while engaging respectfully across differences, offers hope for our divided world. Whether you share their beliefs or not, their testimonies reveal the profound human need for meaning, purpose, and connection to something greater than ourselves.